Hello guys, do you know about the widely consumed alcoholic beverage? You're right, it's beer. Not only that, after tea and coffee, it is the third most consumed drink overall. Usually, beer is made from barley, but with changing times, it can be made from other cereals also such as wheat, maize, rice, oats, etc. Normally, beer making process would remain same, but today we will take barley to make you understand the beer making process. The process of making beer is called brewing, and the person or the company which makes beer is called brewer. The commercial place where beer is made or this beer making process takes place is called brewery or beer house. So in this video we will discuss about brewing process or beer making process. The first step in beer making is malting. The term malt means any grain that has been soaked in water and allowed to germinate and then dried. Here in brewing, barley grains are first cleaned, then soaked in water for 2 to 3 days, and then excess water is drained away and allowed to germinate in germinating boxes. For germination, moisture, warmth and oxygen are necessary to grow these kind of shoot and rootlets. These germinated green cereals are called as green malt. So beer is made from malted grains, so also called a malted beverage. Now why this germination process is so important? This germination process actually allows formation of amylase enzyme. Normally alpha and beta amylase. This amylase enzyme actually helps in breaking the more starch into maltose. This maltose is a form of sugar. In simple term, more malt barley is converted into sugar, means you get more alcohol. If you don't understand, don't worry, we will cover it again in the step of fermentation. Now, this germination process is also needed to be stopped as you don't want a new plant. This germination process is stopped by slow heating, and this process of drying and stopping germination process is called kilning. Temperature may vary according to the type of beer you want to produce. For example, if temperature is higher, then darker will be the beer that you produce. But remember, the temperature must not kill the amylase enzyme. Now, after the kilning process, you get dried barley grains. In the next step, these dried barley grains are crushed between rollers to produce coarse powder. This coarse powder is called grist, and this process is called milling. This coarse powder is easy to dissolve in water as compared to malt grains. Now this coarse powder or grist is mixed with warm water, and this resulting material is mixed well and maintained at 65 degrees Celsius for about 1 to 2 hours and even more if you want. This process is called mashing, which is done in mash tun, which is a kind of vessel used for mashing process. This actually gives time to amylase enzyme and malt enzyme to convert more starch into maltose or sugar. Now from this mash tun, the mash is transferred to new vessel with a false bottom called Lauter tun. Now from this mash, liquid is filtered and separated from the solid substances such as husk and other grains residue and transferred to another vessel. Now this filtered and separated liquid which is transferred to another vessel is called Wort, and this whatever solid is left after filtering liquid in mash tun is called brewer's spent grain (BSG), which can be used as animal feed. Now this complete process is called Lautering. Now let's come back. We need this wort for further fermentation. Also, during Lautering process, in order to extract more fermentable wort, we add water during Lautering process. This is known as sparging. But be careful while adding water. It must be added gradually without disturbing the grain bed, which act as natural filter for wort. Ideally, it is said, add sparse water at the same rate as the wort is being drained below. And also don't add or sparse water for too long, as bitter tannins might strip away with the wort. Now, in the next step, this wort is boiled in huge copper or stainless steel kettle for around 2 to 3 hours and continuously stirred. Hops and sugars are added at different stages of wort boiling. The taste of beer depends on the type and the amount of hop and sugar added. More the hops, bitter the beer. Now what is this hop? Hop is a type of flower of hop plant. It adds flavor and aroma to the beer. Now during boiling, water evaporates and this wort becomes concentrated. Also, this boiling stops or deactivates malt enzyme. Now is the time for wort clarification. Here this wort is either fed into the whirlpool or in the same container it is stirred. Now the hops particles and other undissolved protein form a cone in the middle of the container. These hops particles and undissolved proteins are called trub, which is cleared out from the wort. And then this clearer and kinder of pure wort is cooled down to 10 to 20 degrees Celsius. For this we use wort cooler or chiller. Now this cooled wort is pumped to fermentation tanks. Now comes the most important step, fermentation. First let's understand what is fermentation. In fermentation, action of yeast upon sugar solution breaks down the sugar into alcohol and carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide escapes into the air and we are left with fermented beverage. Higher the amount of sugar in the substance used, higher the alcohol percentage in the fermented beverage. Now you get an idea why we concentrate on this germination process which produce amylase enzyme, which convert more starch into sugar. Here for obtaining sugar for fermentation we used malted barley. Now in fermentation tank, this fermentation process takes place and special brewing yeast is added. Now based on the kind of brewing yeast, there are two types of fermentation, top fermentation and bottom fermentation. Top fermentation means when fermentation is completed, the yeast floats to the top of the liquid and collected for future use. And the bottom fermentation is precisely the opposite. Top fermentation yeast relies on warm weather, for example, Saccharomyces cerevisiae. And the opposite to this, bottom fermentation relies on cooler weather, for example, Saccharomyces pastorianus. So, when brewer want top fermented beer such as ale, porter, stouts, they pitch Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Likewise, for creating bottom fermented beer such as lager, will pitch Saccharomyces pastorianus. Now once this fermentation process is completed, now is the time for conditioning or maturing. The fermented young beer is racked into storage tank and stored for several weeks to months at 0 to 2 degrees Celsius. Now during conditioning or maturation, secondary fermentation also takes place with remaining sugar and yeast. And some manufacturer also add still fermented wort to kickstart or speed up the secondary fermentation. And this process of adding wort to kickstart secondary fermentation is known as crossening. After fermentation takes place, remaining yeast particles and protein tannins sink to the bottom, and these are filtered out with the help of fining or filtering agents. Now what are these fining agents? For that I'll suggest to watch this video on wine making process. But nowadays we do this filtering with the help of mechanical filtering units. For example, This is Smart Beer Membrane Filter by Pentair. Now in filtration, any remaining tannins, dead yeast cells and other residues are removed and beer become more clear and beer acquired its natural texture and carbonation. After filtration, one more step is followed, flash pasteurization. In flash pasteurization, liquid is passed through high temperature for very short time for almost seconds and followed by rapid cooling. This can be done by an equipment named plate heat exchanger. Here is one from CPC Systems. Pasteurization kills any spoilage microorganism and extends the shelf life of beer. It also kills any active enzyme or yeast from further fermenting the beverage. Now in the final step, kegs or bottles are filled with the final beer product. Some brands prefer bottling just after the filtration, and later those bottles or cans passed through tunnel pasteurization and stored to sell. And some brewer or beer manufacturer don't use this pasteurization process for genuine draft beers, which must be kept at refrigerated temperature to preserve flavors and slow any remaining yeast activities. Now for some extra information, during bottling process, some brewers also go for one more step, carbonation. Some brewers add carbon dioxide to make beer more fizzy. Addition of carbon dioxide is called carbonation, which can be achieved by injecting the CO2. If no CO2 is found in the beer, it's called flat beer. Although good companies don't add CO2, they rely on natural carbonation produced during second fermentation. Some brewers practice bottle conditioning, adding small amount of yeast, sugar and or wort after packaging to bring on secondary fermentation inside the bottle, thereby adding depth of flavor and natural carbonation, while extending the shelf life of beer and removing any oxygen present in the bottle.